Today, I'm going to begin reading that which is Tattvartha Sutra. And this is a classic Jain manual for understanding the true nature of reality. This series of texts translated at the instigation of the Sacred Literature Trust will make the world's heritage of spiritual and ethical insight available to a much wider audience. I hope it will help to break down the barriers of suspicion and ignorance and encourage understanding and tolerance in this age of tension and conflict. H.R.H. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. For readers of poetic and inspired literature, as well as for those in an international understanding on the deepest level, it is hard to imagine a publishing venture more radical, more imaginative, more desirable, or more exciting. The first English translation available outside of India of a sacred text of Jainism. Souls influence each other through service which may be favorable or unfavorable, beneficial or harmful. They cannot live independently of one another. They have to share their pleasure and pain with others. As partners in good and evil acts, they are jointly responsible, although they must bear the karmic results individually for the part they play. They create a common environment and live together in weal and woe. From that which is. That which is known as the Tattvartha Sutra to Jains is recognized by all four Jaina traditions as the earliest, most authoritative, and comprehensive summary of their religion, unique in bringing together classic commentaries from each tradition. This translation of Tattvartha Sutra provides in one volume a detailed explanation of the universe, the place of humanity within it, and the path to it, through it to liberation. Spiritual leaders and scholars of Jaina sects have overseen the selection and translation of this extraordinary book, included is the classic commentary of the original author, Asmuvarti, as well as those of later Jain philosophers. It continues on the next page. Both main sects, I guess there are two sections of Jainism, also present our essays by translator Dr. Nathmal Tatia and chief advisor Professor Padma Jani. This excellent introduction to Jaina belief is illuminated by 13 diagrams and is an invaluable resource for understanding one of the oldest religious texts in India. Usmavati was a 2nd century Jaina monk, and Dr. Nathmal Tatia is a research director of the Jaina Visva Bharati, an institute of Oriental studies in Ladnu, Rajasthan, India. This translation of Tattvartha Sutra was sponsored by the Institute of Jainology in the UK and Bhagavan Mahavari Memorial Samiti in New Delhi. The International Sacred Literature Trust was established to promote understanding and open discussion between and within faiths, and to give voice in today's world to the wisdom that speaks across time and traditions. Other titles from this publisher include Australian Aboriginal Traditions, Buddhism, The Words of My Perfect Teacher, Indian Traditions, In the Dark of the Heart, Hymns of Mira, Judaism, Gates of Light, and Taoism, Lasu's treatise on the response of the Tao. The categories of truth. In this first chapter, Usmavati lays the foundation of his entire work by introducing the three essential components of the spiritual path and the 7 categories of truth, which are the essential nature of reality. The enlightened worldview, enlightened knowledge, and enlightened conduct are the path to liberation. The worldview which sees the many in the whole is enlightened. It is the true understanding informing an individual's thought and actions in solving the ethical and spiritual problems of worldly bondage, and of release from that bondage, it avoids dogmas which inhibit free and open thought. Enlightened worldview begets enlightened knowledge, which in turn begets enlightened conduct. So enlightened worldview is the cause, enlightened knowledge, and the conduct, the effect. Spiritual path is determined by this integrated trinity. In this first sutra and commentary, the author states his own view of the path to liberation, which emphasizes the disagreement with the doctrines of other religious movements of the time. The SS commentary specifies some of these doctrines, which, with reference to the concept of soul, liberation, and the path to liberation. Sankhya Yoga, doctrine of soul as pure consciousness without particularized knowledge. The Nyaya Vajrasika concept of the liberated soul as absolutely free of thought, and the Buddhist concept of the liberated soul as the burnt out flame of the lamp are all rejected. Other concepts of the path of liberation that flourished in ancient times are similarly rejected. For instance, the doctrines of knowledge alone, faith alone, or conduct alone as the right path to liberation. To possess the enlightened worldview is to believe in the categories of truth. A view is itself neither knowledge nor intuition, but an outlook or way of seeing, a conviction backed by reason. As the SB puts it, belief in categories of truth means belief in categories which reason and the scriptures have established as true. The indication of enlightened belief in a person includes calmness, fear of, and distaste for worldly life, compassion, and belief in transmigration of the soul. The enlightened worldview may arise spontaneously or through learning. The worldly life of a soul has no beginning. The soul transmigrates from one birth to the next according to its karma, which determines its destiny. Nevertheless, each unique soul possesses the inherent knowledge and intuition which can empower it to destroy the beginningless, deluded worldview tormenting it. The enlightened worldview can arise at the appropriate moment in any form of life. Infernal, subhuman, human, or celestial. When the painful nature of life is realized, a vision of Jina omniscient founders of the Jaina religion, is seen. The teachings of the Jaina heard or a past life remembered. Sometimes this enlightened view breaks through spontaneously without outside assistance. Sometimes it arises through tuition or study. The categories of truth are souls, sentient entities, non-sentient entities. This inflow of karmic particles to the soul, binding of the karmic particles to the soul, stopping the inflow of karmic particles, the falling away of karmic particles, liberation of this from worldly karmic bondage. In this sutra, the categories of truth are restricted to 7, but in some scriptures 9 are mentioned. The 2 additional categories are beneficial and harmful karma, which the commentator includes here as part of the 3rd and 4th categories. The SBT considers them as part of the 4th categories, karmic bondage, because they are fates accomplished. They are the result of inflow. The SS favors including them as both karmic inflow and bondage because they are inflows in their informative state and in bondage in their accomplished state. Translator's notes. The Jaina philosophers developed a unique and detailed theory of the workings of karma. The karmic particles referred to this sutra are material clusters assimilated or bound by the soul of karma. These bound particles cause the soul to vibrate in association with its mind and body. The vibrations manifest as thought, speech, and action and cause further karmic particles to rush into the soul from all directions, thereby perpetuating worldly bondage. As long as it is bound by karma, the soul can never be liberated from worldly existence. In liberated souls, there is no vibration and therefore no accumulation of karmic particles. For full discussion of the mechanics of karma, means of release from it, see chapters 6, 8, and 9. The categories of truth. An enlightened worldview can be analyzed by name, symbol, potentiality, and actuality. The categories of truth are explained for precision and clarity in different ways, through various gateways of investigation, through the approved means of knowledge, and through philosophical standpoints. This sutra lists 4 gateways of investigation. According to these gateways, the first categories of truth, the soul, can be analyzed as follows. Name. Any substance, living or not, can be called a soul in existence as such, in the name at least. For example, a college building can be called All Souls. Symbol. An object, for instance, a statue or painting, may be treated as if it were a soul through its soul only symbolically. Potentiality. A human soul may be called a celestial soul if it has occupied a celestial body in the past life, or is likely to occupy such a body in the future life. Actuality. A living thing may be called a soul, pointing to its actual state now. The categories can be understood with greater accuracy through the approved means of knowledge and the philosophical standpoints. According to some philosophers, the approved means of knowledge are twofold: immediate, innate, and mediate, acquired. In the established tradition of the ancients, there are fourfold: perception, sensation, and comprehension, inference, deduction, analogy, comparison, and articulation, language. The 4 approved means of knowledge are further classified as for oneself or for others. Articulate knowledge falls into both these categories. This is because it is for the speaker, writer, and also for the listener, reader. All other approved means of knowledge are for oneself only. The approved means of knowledge are the fountainhead of the philosophical standpoints. The SS explains that knowledge is followed by specific understanding or aspects of the object through a philosophical standpoint. In other words, the philosophical standpoint gives a limited view of what is presented in its unlimited character by the approved means of knowledge. The philosophical standpoint are twofold, related to the substance and related to modes. The substance of things refers to its persistence, existence, whereas its modes are its different phases of existence. The SS explains that the standpoints related to the substance take note of the name, symbol, and potentialities of the past and future phases, while the standpoint related to the modes explains the actuality of the present moment. The philosophical standpoints are explained in 1.34 and 1.35. So that's going back. Let's go back to the way those are explained now that we have more reference for them. The soul transmigrates from one birth to the next destiny. Intuition which can empower it to destroy the beginningless worldview tormenting it. The enlightened worldview can arise at the appropriate moment in any form of life, infernal, subhuman, human, or celestial. When the painful nature of life is realized, a vision of Jina, omniscient founders of the Jaina religion. So this is saying that enlightenment can take place in subhuman species. So species that are being referred to as lesser than humans. I see all life is equal. That's just me though, but others don't. But this is interesting to note that enlightenment knowledge to be able to take place in other places within the animal kingdom and places beyond Earth, celestial. So just imagine the responsibility it is for like a cat or a dog to be enlightened in their lifetime and to harbor all that within their short life that they share with us. The categories and their attributes are understood in detail in the terms of definition, possession, cause, location, duration, and varieties. This sutra provides a set of 6 gateways of investigation in addition to that provided in 1.5. Using this set, the first category of truth, the soul, can be investigated as follows. How is the soul to be defined? As a substance modified by various states such as the suppression, elimination, or partial suppression, and in worldview as its essential attribute. Now, the investigation shifts focus from the soul to the worldview as the essential attribute of the soul. What is the cause of enlightened worldview? The enlightened worldview arises spontaneously or through learning. What is the location of the enlightened worldview? The enlightened worldview is located in the soul as its inalienable attribute. Friedrich Nietzsche says that once awakened, the soul remains awake. And that would probably include what he would refer to as the infinite return. So, reincarnation. The enlightened worldview arises spontaneously or through learning. The enlightened worldview is located in the soul as its inalienable attribute. What is the duration of the enlightened worldview in the soul? In some souls, it is short-lived, having a beginning and an end, while in others, it has a beginning but no end. For example, the souls that progress spiritually merely by suppressing their deluded worldview have a short-lived enlightened worldview, whereas the souls that have finally eliminated their deluded worldview possess the enlightened worldview eternally. So once awake, the soul remains awake eternally. Because you have to remove your worldview to be awake. Or as the kids nowadays refer to as woke. Right? What are the varieties of enlightened worldview? There are 3 varieties of enlightened worldview. That which is achieved by merely suppressing the karma which covers the enlightened worldview. That which is achieved by partially eliminating and partially suppressing the karma. That which is achieved by completely eliminating the karma. In the book we just read previously, it says that the highest realm of consciousness or ascension that you can ascend to will make you free of karma and the effects of karma, good or bad. Translator's note. The abridged account of the commentary is based on the SB. The SS gives a more elaborate treatment of the enlightened worldview in each of the 6 gateways through the 14-membered disciplines of inquiry. To explore further the categories of truth and enlightened worldview, there are gateways of existence, numerical determination, fields occupied, fields touched, continuity, time-lapse, states, and relative numerical strength. Yet, another set of 8 gateways of investigation is prescribed. The focus in this example is the enlightened worldview, that is, the belief in the categories of truth. Existence. It is accepted that the enlightened worldview is a real and constant attribute of the soul. However, the enlightened worldview will only become apparent in souls that are worthy of it. It does not surface in souls that are reprobate. Their eternal transmigration being predestined. The gateway takes us to another classical set of 13 gateways prescribed by the Jaina scripture for exploring the existence of the soul's physical, mental, and ethical qualifications for the emergence of the enlightened worldview. The 4 transmigration realms, infernal, subhuman, and human and celestial. The 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. The beings with the immobile and mobile bodies. The activities of mind, speech, and body. The passions of anger, pride, deceit, and greed. The 3 sexes, male, female, and hermaphrodites. The 6 psychic colorings, black, blue, gray, red, yellow, white. And the enlightened worldview. The enlightened kinds of knowledge. The 4 kinds of intuition, visual, non-visual, clairvoyant, and omniscience. Conduct, nourishment, sentience. The SS omits Gateway 11 and 13, given by the SB, but it adds the following 3 to create the 14-member discipline of inquiry. Self-restraint, the qualities that make the soul capable of or incapable of liberation, and rationality. Numerical determination. To determine the number of souls with the enlightened worldview, it is necessary to distinguish between the souls that enjoy the enlightened worldview because the particular karma which dilutes the view has been purified, and those souls that have eliminated the karma altogether. The number of the souls in the former category is only innumerable, whereas the number of souls in the latter is infinite, including as it does the infinite number of liberated souls. The latter category also includes souls that have eliminated their destructive karma and are waiting for liberation. At this point, SBT gives a very brief classification of numbers. The number 1 does not lend itself to being counted, and so remains in its own classification of 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, are numbers proper which are classified as innumerable, and infinite. Numerable numbers are those which can be named. Innumerable numbers beyond naming and fall into 3 categories: minimum, intermediate, and maximum. Beyond the innumerable are the infinite numbers, which fall into the same 3 categories. For further information about numbers, see Appendix 1. Field occupied. Only an innumerable part of cosmic space is occupied by souls with enlightened worldview. For the meaning of the word innumerable, see Appendix. If you look up the amount of stars there are in the universe, it'll tell you somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion. And if you look up the amount of humans incarnated in this timeline based on population growth estimates, it'll tell you it's about at 100 billion people have been born on Earth. So that's like an interesting parallel. And this book here says that souls basically get in line every 100 years to be incarnated again on this planet. Every 100 years? Wait, every millennium, every 1,000 years. So you're here in this time for a reason. Only an innumerable part of the cosmic space is touched by an ordinary soul within the enlightened worldview. However, the omniscient soul touches all parts of the cosmic space for the purpose of exhausting the residue of the karmic particles before attaining final liberation. Continuity. The enlightened worldview attained by the partial suppression and partial elimination of karma may endure so briefly in a soul that it passes within one intra-hour. So people can experience enlightenment within an hour, and it's fleeting. It's possible. I wonder if that is like because of external factors. However, for souls which attain the enlightened worldview by totally eliminating the relevant karma, there is a beginning but no end to their enlightened worldview. The enlightened worldview of all souls taken together has neither beginning nor end, because there was no period in the past within some souls possessing the enlightened worldview, nor will there be any in the future. Time lapse. For an individual soul, the time lapse between the end of one period of enlightened worldview and the beginning of another is less than 1 classical hour at the very least, and at the very most may be just short of half the time it takes karmic particles to undergo their complete course of binding and falling away from the soul. For the enlightened worldview of all souls taken together, there is no time lapse, because among the infinite number of souls, there must always be at least some in possession of enlightened worldview. States. There are only 3 states in which the enlightened worldview is possible: those resulting from the suppression, the elimination, and the partial elimination and partial suppression of the karmic particles responsible for diluted worldview. Relative numerical strength. Regarding the number of souls in the 3 states of the enlightened worldview, it is said that fewest are in the state resulting from suppression. A larger number are in the state resulting from partial elimination and partial suppression of karma, and the largest number are in the state which result from the complete elimination of karma, because this is the state which accommodates the infinite number of liberated souls. This sutra receives a further elaborate treatment in the SS not included here, which discusses the 8 gateways of the investigation in the context of 14 stages of spiritual development and the 14-member discipline of inquiry. The variety of knowledge are empirical, articulate, clairvoyant, and mind-reading and omniscient knowledge. Empirical knowledge, cognition is gained through the sense and or mind's ability to comprehend what is sensed. It's empirical knowledge. Articulate knowledge refers to the conceptualization through language. Clairvoyance refers to the perception of things that are out of the natural range of senses. In humans, clairvoyance is acquired through spiritual discipline, whereas for inhabitants of heaven and hell, it is inborn. Clairvoyance is also possible in the moments of hardships for beings that are not human but possess 5 senses and a mind. So your dog could be clairvoyant. Mind reading is the act of seeing the object, the modes of another mind. This knowledge is only acquired by ascetics at the highest level of spirituality. Omniscience refers to the the high level of spirituality, not highest. Omniscience refers to the knowledge of all substance in all their modes, past, present, and future. These 5 varieties of knowledge divide into 2 classes of approved means of knowledge: immediate, acquired, immediate, and innate. The translator's note. The division of knowledge into 2 classes is an innovation of Jaina philosophers. In the established Indian tradition, the approved means of knowledge were most often divided into 4 classes: perception, inference, analogy, articulation, scriptures. In 1.9 and 1.10, the Usmavati follows the ancient Jaina tradition of the 5 varieties of knowledge and the innovative allocation of these as immediate or immediate knowledge that is acquired and innate knowledge. The first 2 varieties of knowledge, empirical and articulate, are acquired knowledge. So acquired being through your senses or through the words that you take in. The remaining 3 varieties of knowledge are instances of innate knowledge. Innate, like being clairvoyant or clairsentient. The power of knowing is innate to the soul, but this power is partially, though never completely, qualified by karmic particles. These sutras classify the varieties of knowledge according to 2 classes of the approved means of the knowledge: acquired, mediate, and innate, immediate, as well as including empirical knowledge. The acquired categories include spiritual knowledge, which is articulated by the teacher. Spiritual knowledge is authentic because it derives from the pure and perfect knowledge of Jina, omniscient teacher who revealed it. The remaining 3 categories of knowledge, clairvoyance, these sutras classify the varieties of knowledge according to 2 classes of the approved means of knowledge: acquired, immediate, and innate, immediate, as well as including empirical and articulate knowledge. The acquired category includes scriptural knowledge, which is articulated by the teacher. Scriptural knowledge is authentic because it derives from the pure and perfect knowledge of the Jina, omniscient teacher, and who revealed it. The remaining 3 varieties of knowledge, clairvoyance, mind reading, and omniscience, are considered innate because they exist independently of the senses, mind, and words. Clairvoyance and mind reading result from the partial suppression and partial elimination of the relevant karma. Strictly speaking, only omniscience is perfectly innate because it alone arises out of the total elimination of knowledge covering karma, and therefore knows everything past, present, and future. All categories of knowledge other than omniscience are accompanied by ignorance due to the constant rise of knowledge covering karma. Karma exists simultaneously in 3 states: eliminated, partially eliminated, and partially suppressed and rising. From the first 2 states comes knowledge, albeit limited. From the 3rd state, rising karma, comes ignorance, either as absence of knowledge or misinformation. So all the categories of knowledge other than omniscience are a mixture of knowledge and ignorance. To have absolutely eliminated all knowledge covering karma is to be omniscient. Memory, recognition, reasoning, and apprehension incorporate the various aspects of empirical knowledge. In this sutra, the author uses a set of synonyms to introduce the 4 aspects of empirical knowledge. The first variety of knowledge. These 4 aspects of empirical knowledge are discussed in the various theories of knowledge in Indian philosophy. Usmavati's classification was accepted by all subsequent Jaina logicians who gave their own estimate of contemporary theories of knowledge and in light of it. Figure 1 provided an overview of the classification of knowledge as given in the preceding sutras and commentaries to 1.9 to 1.13. Empirical knowledge is provided by the senses and the mind. Empirical knowledge arises from the senses alone, the mind alone, or the two acting together. There are beings without minds, such as plants, trees, and some lower animals whose knowledge is necessarily through their senses alone. Plants and trees have only one sense, the tactile sense, and so their perception is produced by touch alone. In human beings, however, the empirical knowledge is sometimes produced by the joint activity of the senses and the mind, and at other times by the activity of the mind alone. For instance, the empirical knowledge that this is a table is produced by the collaboration of the sense of sight and the mind, whereas remembering that the table looks like requires only the mind to act. There is also a variety of empirical knowledge that is instinctive, such as the ability of a plant to grow towards the light or a creeper towards a support. Here we have the table of knowledge in a visual format. So we have knowledge, and we have the two ways to acquire it: innate, immediate clairvoyance, mind reading, and omniscience. And then there's the acquired methods, which are empirical and articulate. Empirical include non-linguistic and quasi-linguistic. And articulate includes infralinguistic, linguistic, and scriptural. Quasi-linguistic, sensory perception, memory, recognition, reasoning, apprehension, inference, analogy, implication, probability, and negation, all in the quasi-linguistic realm. Clairvoyance, and the innate is clairvoyant, mind reading, and omniscience. Empirical knowledge develops through the four stages of articulate sensation, specific inquiry, articulate comprehension, and imprint. Inarticulate sensation is the mere sense of objects, the grasping of their generic character. Specific inquiry is the curiosity to know the whole from the part, to identify the features. It includes the process of elimination, identifying what the object does not have and what it is not. SB equates specific inquiry with speculation, endeavor, reasoning, examination, thought, and inquisitiveness. Articulate comprehension arises from specific inquiry. It is the cognition, a definite identification of the subject, understanding both that of what it is and what it is not. SB equates it with exclusion, expulsion, limitation, and banishment. Imprint is the retention of the identification of the object, creating an impression of the mind, which is experienced as a memory. SB explains imprints with synonyms such as continued cognition, memory, and retention and determination. Thus, the four stages constitute the formula for complete mental activity. The style of SB is to explain the philosophical ideas using the ancient devices of set synonyms, while the SS style is to explain with crisp, succinct definitions. The object's perceptible but relatively pure mental faculties are multiple and complex, and comprehension of them is quick, independent, unambiguous, and constant. The objects perceptible by relatively pure mental faculties are few and simple, and the comprehension of them is slow, dependent on mediation, and ambiguous and inconstant. The objects perceptible by relatively pure mental faculties are multiple and complex, and the comprehension of them is quick, partially exposed, unspoken, and constant. The object perceptible by relatively impure mental faculties are few and simple, and the comprehension of them is slow, completely exposed, spoken, and inconstant. In this sutra, the object of empirical knowledge and the nature of the inquiry into them are described according to the purity of the subject mental faculties. In the SS version of the sutra, partially exposed refers to empirical knowledge of an entire object, although the subject has only had access to the part of the object, whereas completely exposed refers to the knowledge of an object which has been completely available to the subject. Similarly, unspoken refers to an empirical knowledge of an object without it being described as opposed to spoken, which refers to comprehending an object only when it is explicitly spoken of. The thing perceived continues to be the object of all four stages of empirical knowledge. The thing barely contacted is the object of empirical knowledge at the first stage. Now, the objects of empirical knowledge are divided into two categories: that which the thing comprehended and the thing barely contacted. Bare contact with a thing takes place at the moment it reaches the senses. This is a stage of inarticulate sensation. This contact awareness gradually proceeds towards the plane of consciousness, that is, from the senses alone to the mind and the senses. The phenomenon described here is called the threshold level, and in modern psychology, the measure of intensity at which the mental or physical stimulus is perceived and produces a response. Suppose, for example, that a man is woken by a call. The sound atoms reach the man's ear in succession, and in time, when the ears are sufficiently saturated with sound atoms, he wakes. Jaina thinkers regard sound as material atoms. The awakening of the consciousness is followed by the other three stages of empirical knowledge: specific inquiry, cognition, and imprint, all of which are concerned with the object alone. The inarticulate sensation relates to both the constant with the object and the object. In other words, there are two phases of the subject: its initial appearance and its continued existence. Inarticulate sensation notes both the initial appearance and the continued existence, whereas the latter three stages recognize only the continued existence. Inarticulate sensation of contact with things is not possible for the eye or the mind. Inarticulate sensation of a barely contacted thing is possibly only through the actual physical contact, and so is confined to the four senses. Whereas hearing, taste, and smell and touch, the eye and the mind comprehend their object from a distance without physical contact. This sutra disputes the view of some philosophical schools that an object sends rays to the eyes. There is a philosophical contact between eyes and objects. Articulate knowledge arises in the wake of empirical knowledge. It is of both classes of scripture: the outer corpus of many texts and the inner corpus of 12. The second of the five senses of knowledge, articulate knowledge, is now defined. Articulate knowledge is essentially knowledge derived from words, but according to convention, what is referred to here is the entire Jaina sacred literature. The SB makes a clear distinction between empirical knowledge and scriptural knowledge. The empirical knowledge is concerned only with the objects that exist in the present. Scriptural knowledge relates to the object of all three phases of time, past and present and future. The 12 texts of Inner Corpus are the work of Jainas and their immediate disciples. The Jainas were omniscient, and their immediate disciples enjoyed a distinctive intelligence and gift for communication. The learned ascetics who followed the immediate disciples of Jainas composed the outer corpus, consisting of many texts. For the benefit of their disciples whose power of understanding was inferior, the ascetics who compiled the outer corpus are said to have inherited complete or partial knowledge of the earlier literature. Clairvoyance has two types. The beings of heaven and hell are both clairvoyants. Their sutras begin the definition of the third variety of knowledge, clairvoyance, by classifying it into two types. The first is the inborn clairvoyance of the infernal and celestial beings. Ultimately, the nature of all clairvoyance is due to the kinds of partial elimination and partial suppression of clairvoyance covering karma. But the case of the infernal and celestial beings, it is said to be due to birth because they are born with the requisite partial elimination and partial suppression. And the inborn power of clairvoyance is compared to the inborn capacity of birds to fly and fish to swim. The clairvoyance, which arises from partially eliminating and partially suppressing knowledge covering karma, in a certain way is possible only in animals and humans. Such clairvoyance has 6 subtypes. So when you think of karma, don't think of it as like this personal weapon against those who have done you wrong or whatever. Rather, that karma is like a blanket that covers that being from receiving knowledge due to, and if there's bad karma based on an activity or behavior, you have to imagine there's a reason for that. And that karma exists within them already. It's not a result of their action, but it's a result of the ignorance beheld. Clairvoyance, which arises from partially eliminating and partially suppressing knowledge covering karma in a certain way, is possible only in animals and humans. Such clairvoyance has 6 subtypes. The second type of clairvoyance is that of a soul which has partially eliminated and partially suppressed knowledge covering the karma in a certain way during its current lifetime. The 6 subtypes of clairvoyance assessed by the reducing particular karmic effects during one's lifetime refer to differ in the strength and constancy with which they affect the soul. The first subtype occurs in the person in a particular place but does not continue when he or she moves to a different place. The second subtype of clairvoyance is not restricted to any particular place, but will not last in a lifetime. The third is explained as clairvoyance that gradually contracts in the range, and the fourth as gradually expanding in range. The fifth subtype fluctuates repeatedly, contracting and expanding in its range. The sixth, once it has arisen in a being, continues till death or into the next life, and sometimes even until omniscience is achieved. Mind reading has 2 types, simple and complex. The types of mind reading differ in relation to their purity and infallibility. These 2 sutras explain in the 4th variety of knowledge mind reading. Simple mind readings reads only a few general modes of the mind. However, complex mind readings reads many different and complex modes of the mind. It is therefore considered purer than simple mind readings. Moreover, it is infallible, lasting until one attains omniscience. It is wider in extent and penetrates more deeply into the minds of others. Simply, mind reading is relatively impure, fallible, and limited in scope and shallow. Translators note, This simple mode relates to the thoughts about an object or action, and the complex to the deeper motivation and the beliefs that lie behind these thoughts. According to some thinkers, only the modes of material clusters that make up the mind are directly known in mind reading. The thoughts expressed by these modes are not read directly, but inferred. This explanation is rejected by others for the concept of physical mind. Clairvoyance and mind reading differ from each other in their purity, spatial range, and species of the knowing subject and the nature of the object identified by them. The difference between mind reading and clairvoyance is identified through 4 factors. Firstly, to be able to mind read, a soul must be in a purer state than it is necessary for clairvoyance. Mind reading knows the thinking expressed by the modes of the material clusters which constitute the mind. Mind reading knows the finer modes of the material clusters which are beyond the reach of clairvoyance. Secondly, clairvoyance can operate in a space ranging from innumerable part of a finger to the entire cosmic space, whereas mind reading is confined to the region inhabited by human beings. Thirdly, clairvoyance is available to souls residing in any of the realms of existence, whether they are fully, partially, or self-restrained, or completely devoid of self-restraint. Mind reading, however, it is possible only in human beings with self-restraint, specified by the SB as spiritually advanced aesthetics. Fourthly, clairvoyance can identify all clusters of matter, but not in all their modes. Mind reading, however, can know the infinitesimal. So not like dismal, but infinitesimal. So like retract the dis from dismal and put an infinite as the prefix. Part of these 3 clusters. In short, clairvoyance is extensive but shallow, whereas mind reading is more limited but deep. The domain of empirical and articulate knowledge extends to all substances, though not in all their modes. The description of the domain of the 5 varieties of knowledge begin with empirical and articulate knowledge. There are 6 substances in the cosmos: the medium of motion and the medium of rest, space, matter, souls, and time. All these, in a limited range of modes, constitute the domain of empirical and articulate knowledge. Only the omniscient soul fully knows the infinite modes of all 6 substances. The domain clairvoyance extends to all matter, though not in all modes. The domain of mind reading extends only to an infinitesimal part of the domain of clairvoyance. These sutras describe the domain of the 2 varieties of knowledge, clairvoyance and mind reading. The domain of mind reading is narrower than that of clairvoyance because mind reading can only identify the modes of the material clusters that constitute the mind, while clairvoyance can identify all kinds of material clusters in cosmic space. However, clairvoyance cannot read the mind. That is, it cannot identify the mode of mind's material clusters because these are too subtle. For further points of difference between mind reading and clairvoyance, see 1.26. The domain of omniscience extends to all substances and all their modes. Here is the domain of the final variety of knowledge is described. Omniscience is autonomous, perfect, whole, incomparable, independent, pure, and all-encompassing. Substance or mode lies beyond this range. Up to 4 of the 5 varieties of knowledge may be simultaneously available in all souls. The availability of the varieties of knowledge to a particular soul are now discussed. In the soul, empirical knowledge can be available on its own. The combination of empirical knowledge with articulate knowledge is also possible, as is the triple combination such as empirical, articulate, and clairvoyant knowledge, or empirical, articulate, and mind-reading knowledge. Sometimes empirical, articulate, clairvoyant, and mind-reading knowledge occurred all together. According to the scriptures, empirical and articulate knowledge are always available in all living beings, including one-sensed organisms and plants. The articulate knowledge of souls without a mind is infralinguistic in nature. That is, the conceptualization is very feeble. The first four varieties of knowledge, all of which are due to the partial elimination and partial suppression of knowledge, cover, and karma, cannot exist with omniscience, which occurs when knowledge, cover, and karma is completely eliminated. The SB notes that according to some thinkers, the other four varieties of knowledge do in fact coexist with omniscience, but being overshadowed by it, they become, as do the senses, effectively defunct in its presence. In this view, omniscience is like the appearance of the bright sun in the cloudless sky. It is so outshines the other luminous bodies that it deprives them of their luminosity. The SB maintains that knowledge as well as intuition, both of which are pure and perfect, are simultaneously present in genus. The SB objects to this. The SBT objects to this view on the grounds that it is not stated in the scripture. Empirical, articulate, and clairvoyant knowledge may be enlightened as well as diluted. This introduces the double nature of the first three varieties of knowledge as either enlightened or diluted. The criterion for the enlightened or diluted character of these varieties of knowledge is the enlightened or diluted worldview of respective subjects. The last two varieties of knowledge, mind reading and omniscience, are inherently enlightened. Diluted, empirical, articulate, and clairvoyant knowledge added to the 5 pure varieties of knowledge enumerated make a total of 8 varieties of knowledge. A person with a diluted worldview is like an insane person who follows arbitrary whims and cannot distinguish true from false. The empirical, articulate, and clairvoyant knowledge of a person with a deluded worldview are bound to be deluded because the worldview is the foundation of one's knowledge and conditions all speculation. The true or deluded nature of knowledge is not determined by the grasp of practical facts, but by the ethical or spiritual value which provides the viewpoint. The deluded worldview misleads thinking and conduct, overpowering them with delusion. The philosophical standpoints are the common person's view, generic view, practical view, linear view, and literal view. The philosophical standpoints are the common person's view, the generic view, the practical view, the linear view, literal view, an etymological view, and actual view. A common person's view has 2 subtypes, and the literal view has 3. The doctrine of philosophical standpoints mentioned in 1.6 is introduced for detailed explanation. The philosophical standpoints allow for different estimates of reality in using different frames of reference. The first standpoint, the common person's view, overlooks a distinction between the remote and immediate, noting one or the other as if it were the whole, depending upon the intention of the observer. The second standpoint, the generic view, combines the part with the whole. The generic term is used for a specific. The emphasis on general rather than specific has led to the absolutist systems of philosophy. The third standpoint, the practical view, concentrates on the function of a thing or being. It is analytical in approach and often uses metaphors to explain the nature of beings. The fourth standpoint, the linear view, considers a real only those modes which exist at the moment. The past and future modes of the things are not real as they have served or will serve the purpose and do not exist at the moment. The fifth standpoint, the literal view, uses words at their face value to signify the real nature of things. Each word has very particular meanings. In the literal view, even changing the gender, number, word ending, or tense of a word is thought to change its meaning and therefore to change the object to which it refers. So this is the etymological view. It is not appropriate to use words in different genders, numbers to refer to the same object or event. The 3 subtypes of the literal view are the view of the immediately present, the etymological view, the actuality view, and the view of the immediate presence restrict the meaning of the words to an actual state of things which it refers to. The other 2 subtypes are classified by the SS as standpoints in their own right. The 6 standpoints in the SS tradition, the etymological view, classified by SB as a subtype of the 5th standpoint, discard the conventional use of words in favor of the meaning derived from its root. So those using words like with the the study and meaning and the root of the word as acknowledged. The etymological view asserts that because the root of synonyms are different, they are not actually synonyms. In the sense of words, that means that the same as each other. The seventh standpoint in the SS tradition is the actuality view, classified in SB as subtypes of the fifth standpoint, recognizing only action implied by the root meaning of a word. To be real, the object must satisfy the activity meant by the word. According to the SS, a philosophical standpoint is a proposition established by logic. The propositions are of two kinds: those related to the substance, that is, to the essential feature of a thing, and two, those related to modes, that is, the different phases of things' existence. For example, of each philosophical standpoint. The SB describes a philosophical standpoint as guides, ushers, agents, proofs, determiners, revealers, finders, and indicators, which represent the concepts from different perspectives. They are insights into the different facets of reality. They are completely complementary rather than mutually exclusive, helping to place all varieties of knowledge in their proper perspective. The first three philosophical standpoints, common, persons, generic, and practical, recognize all 8 varieties of knowledge, of which 2, mind, reading, and omniscience, are always true, as they are always accompanied by enlightened worldview, and 3, empirical, articulate, and clairvoyant knowledge are true when accompanied by the enlightened worldview, and diluted when accompanied by a diluted worldview. Even the 3 diluted varieties are considered valid in practical life, because each involves awareness of the object, albeit within a limited capacity. The fourth philosophical standpoint, the linear view, does not recognize the validity of empirical knowledge, whether enlightened or diluted, because both tend to be indeterminate and indecisive in their identification of objects. Instead, the linear view recognizes scriptural knowledge as authentic because it knows its objects in all their modes and characteristics. The fifth philosophical standpoint, the literal view, accepts scriptural knowledge and omniscience as the most valuable varieties of knowledge. The literal view does not accept the validity of empirical knowledge, clairvoyance, and mind reading, because they are subordinate to scriptural knowledge and as such have no essential functions of their own. Nor does the literal view recognize the importance of the diluted varieties of empirical, scriptural, and clairvoyant knowledge, because according to this view, all souls have the power of knowledge and this cannot be damaged. The philosophical standpoint solves many philosophical disputes by clarifying the perspective of the disputants. The first 4 standpoints, common, persons, generic, practical, and linear, analyzes the logical implication of the conflicted doctrines, whereas the last 3 focus on the linguistic nuances. Here are some translator notes to cover the entire previous chapter. Speaking from the first standpoint, the common person's view we might describe in an area of tropical forest as timber, in which case we are seeing the use of the trees for building materials. On the other hand, standing 2 inches from a deadly snake, we might describe the area as a death trap, in which case we are describing it in terms of the immediate. From the second standpoint, the generic view, so it looks like we're just going to get a bunch of examples here. We might describe the jungle as a lot of trees or woods, and thus generalizing from one particular life form on an area. Are you getting anything from these examples? Because my throat's kind of hurting after an hour of reading. I got to work on that. The more I read, the more vocal capacity I will have to speak at length. There are some people that can speak for hours. At a certain point, my voice goes like, my throat starts to hurt. I can almost feel cuts happening in my throat, which then open that's the cuts in your throat would be like an immunodeficiency, because the skin lining of your throat is partial of your immune system, and the cuts in your throat would allow bacteria in there that could cause whatever. Let's just finish it out. Okay. From the third standpoint, the practical view, we might say, this is a treasure trove, referring metaphorically to the financial benefit from cutting and selling these trees. We might as easily say, these are the lungs of the earth, referring to the function of the trees in releasing oxygen. This is the gene pool of the earth, referring to the millions of diverse species living there, which provide the basis for new life. I would refer to that as a petri dish of earth. From the fourth standpoint, the linear view, we would recognize the area in question as the breathing organ for the planet and as a rich collection of species, but would not perceive the area as timber or as money derived from this, as these latter would be potential modes, not the present modes. So those are referring to the modes rather than the substance. In the fifth standpoint, the literal view, we would say that the most of the life forms in the area of land are not in fact trees. Even those that were called trees, such as banana plants, were not trees as they did not have wooded trunks. We would also seek to describe the area of land by the most appropriate term. Wood, forest, wilderness, jungle. This would lead to an etymological and actuality view. The etymological view, we would say, so the etymology, when used properly, is going to arrive you to have distinctions within your mind. If you don't have the words for it, you are less likely to be able to make the distinctions within your mind. The etymological view, we would say that this is not a jungle, as the root of this jangala. This Sanskrit for the dry desert. If we called them woods, we would name the uad of trees, but would not be including the large amount of herbaceous, fungal, and animal life. Forest, from the Latin forest, meaning outdoors, would be the general as to include gardens, plantations, and so on. Wilderness is from wilder, wild deer, and so is inaccurate. The wild, meaning simply untamed nature, might perhaps be the most accurate. So into the wild would be the most accurate. Isn't there a book with that title? Into the Wild. Call to the Wild. Something like that. One of those books they make you read in school. From the seventh standpoint, the actuality view, we would reject the jungle and wilderness, but woods, forests, and the wild as all describing some actual reality. In that area which does not support the activities of being wood, being outdoors, and being wild. The SB clearly accepts the inherent purity of all of the forms at all times. This is in accord with the great Jaina philosopher Kunda, who argued that transcendental perspective is superior to the empirical one in assessing the essence of Jaina philosophy. However, the SB does not specifically distinguish between the transcendental and empirical viewpoints, as did Kunda. An important outcome of the SB recognizing the inherent capacity of all souls is to know the truth is that all traditional approved means of knowledge, perception, inference, analogy, and scripture are seen as valid. The classification of philosophical standpoints in Sutra 1.34 and 1.35 and their exposition by the SB are endorsed in the ancient Satkanda Dogma and the Kasakupundanda. I'm going to read that again. I butchered it. Kasayapuhada and the Dijamambra scripture. These point to the antiquities of the Sutra and the SB. Okay, that concludes philosophical standpoints. And next will be chapter 2, the nature of the soul. I shall put $2 in here for every chapter I read. And when I'm done, I'm going to take myself out to dinner with that $2 per chapter. but it has to be within the budget of that. Yeah, that's how I do that. Thank you for tuning in. It's been another live reading from K9 Training plus Human Development with Adonis, which would obviously be in the human development portion. And I encourage you all to live with discipline that allows for you to be your best self so that you can be the best to the loved ones in your life, whether those are human or animals. Although humans are not devoid of the animal kingdom. Thank you for tuning in. Much love. Oh, and if you'd like, we have the complete reading of Bhagavad Gita. That'd be like within 3 hours.